Hi, my name is Leah Lovelight, and welcome to Reveal Microdose Conversations, designed to support you in your journey of radical self-acceptance and empowerment as a woman. We hope you enjoy the magic. So welcome to this session of Reveal Microdose Conversations. My name is Leah Lovelight. I'm the co-founder and co-creator of Reveal Retreats and also the host of this conversation. It is such a remarkable honor to be able to welcome Amanda Rooker to this conversation. She is, how do I even begin to describe you? You are a deep, soulful human being that I know is here on a magnificent mission to support those who truly care about the world getting their story out there. You are a friend of mine. You are a dear soul sister of mine. And you are also a person who has supported me in the development of my book to taking it to the next level. So not only do I get to enjoy you as a human being, but I also get to work with you professionally. And it has been one of the most remarkable experiences because my story is not easy to get out. And we're going to talk a lot more about that today. And you truly do have a gift. So I just want to say thank you to you for being here.
Thank you.
Just for those that don't know Amanda, I would love to just introduce a little bit about you. So Amanda is the founding partner of Split Seed Media. She is an international best-selling book collaborator, writing coach and consultant, and author advocate. Her passion is empowering thought leaders to see their unique value, discover how their greatest difficulties can be transformed into their greatest gifts, and share new ideas and paradigms to seed a positive future. And so, Amanda, I would love to ask if you have anything else to share about that introduction of you.
Well, life stories are tricky, aren't they? Because when you're living them, they don't seem so empowering. And, it's really hard to see, if there's ever going to be a happy ending. But so I do help people write books today, but that is not always what I did. My first career was actually in the ministry and specifically the healing ministry. And so what that looked like is talking to large groups and facilitating small groups and working one-on-one with women coming from abusive or addictive backgrounds. And one thing I noticed that seemed to happen each time is whenever I worked with someone, no matter what their life story was or what their experiences were, for some reason, I could see their true self shine through, just like potential gifts. And I could always see the good or the gold thread in what they were telling me. And I would just tell them, spoke into existence, what I saw and reflect it back to them. And I noticed that so quickly that creates healing in people's lives. And so it was really meaningful work for me at that time. But a strange thing happened as I committed myself to my spiritual practice and my spiritual journey. My understanding of the world expanded, and it started to feel like the church was too small of a place for me to really be in full integrity. And so I ended up leaving, and it was probably one of the more traumatic decisions that I made. And my husband and I were both in the ministry, and we both ended up leaving. And it was a confusing time, but out of the blue, a friend of mine asked if I could edit his book. And there's some background to this. I was an English major. I was a writing tutor in my, even before the ministry. So there's some background there. And it was right about the time when self-publishing was becoming a thing. So there's tons of ferment and excitement around authors connecting directly to readers. And so I was like, okay, let's just jump in. And, I guess, a new life story started because from there, just from referrals, I got into freelance editing and supporting people with writing and a whole business started growing. And what I noticed was even working with authors, I would say I still saw that uniqueness would pop out at me. They'd share a manuscript, they'd tell me about a framework, and I would, that same dynamic would happen. And I realized that I can, really live out my way to serve in this context as well. And so, from there, a whole business grew. And I ended up calling it Split Seed before I even really knew what that meant. But what I see that as is the split seed is us as the author. When we start breaking open and showing new life and sharing it with others, that's the idea, that when we share our true selves, it's it has a life of its own and it bears fruit in the lives of others. So this convoluted path to get here, but only after time and looking back do I even see the thread.
I love that and I appreciate that, because so much of life is being able to look back and bring forward that golden thread. And so I appreciate where you are on your journey, and that your journey is something that you're really inviting authors to come along with you on the same journey of you and the evolution of your own story. And what I really appreciate about what you shared is it was a complex time to leave an identity and to step into a new one, but what was of most value to you translated with you into the new beginning of Split Seed. And so that's it's connected into this idea of reveal for celebrating exactly who you are and honoring that. And sometimes we grow and change, and sometimes we want to stay the same. So I would love to see how you might intertwine this story that you help authors pull out into this element of celebrating exactly who you are.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the key, right? Because so many of us have shame around past experiences, especially if, even from a professional perspective, like sometimes we leave careers or they don't work out, or, things happen. And what we don't realize at the time is that that's the making of a great story. We have to have challenges and experiences that, bring us to the end of who we are sometimes, that allows us to dig deep and find our greatest strengths and our gold when things are hard. And so we don't want to cover up or hide the hard parts of our lives from ourselves, at least. And we need safe places and people to, share those kinds of things with when we're going through them. It's important to have safe spaces there. But when we can celebrate exactly who we are, without judgment, without putting on some external lens about what's successful and what's not successful, I mean, that's when we actually come to life. I mean, we get to celebrate ourselves as part of the process of life and inspire others who might also be on a journey and, not feeling great about their journey. But when we get to be vulnerable and share our challenges, that's what sparks the life in other people too.
So what I'd like to dig in a little bit on is, because I think that most people out there that want to contribute to the embetterment of others have those stories that they can pull from. And sometimes in our journey in life, we want to hide those stories because of what you shared, of the shame and of the societal impact, or what might people think. And so what might you say to an individual that knows that they have those stories and that potentially they're hiding it not just from others, but from themselves, which might cause conflict within their own world? What might you say to those individuals that are wanting to break free, but don't necessarily know how to unhide those parts of themselves?
Yes. So I would probably respond by telling a story. And the story that comes to mind is about a mutual friend of ours, actually, Jesse Harless, who has been through a journey with addiction and coming through on the other side. And he has actually written a book about his story and, coaches and consults with other people on that topic as well. And, way back when he was struggling, in the depths of his story, I am sure he didn't see any way out. He thought his life was ending. He couldn't see what was coming next. But only by sticking with, by looking back, by surviving through that story and coming through on the other side, does he see the value in those dark places? Because now that he's made it through, he has a story to share with people who are stuck right in that, in that place where they can't see their way out as well. So I would say, even if you're in the middle of a story that's really hard right now, just know that there is potential. It's probably the crucible that will reveal the gold in your life. And it's okay not to see it yet. You don't have to put a false story on it right now. It can just be whatever it is. Don't try to predict it. Don't try to, know what the results are going to be. Don't expect that you're going to, maybe write a book about it. Don't put that pressure on yourself, but just know that, even when things look dark in the moment, it's usually only after time do you see what's going on. So I would just say, don't put any pressure on yourself to make sense of it, but find compassionate witnesses. Find other people in your life who are honest about their own struggles and who you admire. And, sometimes we can't see the meaning in our own life or our own wisdom without it being reflected back to us by community and by trusted people. And I just think that's the beautiful thing about what you offer in Reveal is like, it was certainly that for me when I went last January to Puerto Rico. I just feel like being in a safe community of women who are celebrated exactly as they are, in process. I mean, that helps us feel like we're not alone.
Yeah, yeah. And I know one of the special parts about Split Seed is that you are really committed to not just helping the book have a story be told, but also because you say that people don't just want a book, they want the author. And
Yes.
so what might you say to an individual that's like, oh, I know I got a book in me, but kind of are afraid of being seen as an author? What's something that you do to support your clients empowering themselves as an author?
Hmm. Well, one thing I do is I give them space to share their own story, where it doesn't have to be public. This is just a private version. They get to share their story and, there's no pressure to share anything publicly, but I have the opportunity to hear what their unique strengths are. Because usually, when you're talking with someone else, what's unique about them tends to pop out. Like when you meet someone new, you're like drawn to whatever's new about them, right? And it's kind of obvious to someone else, but it's so not obvious to us, to ourselves, who is sharing our story. So for me, when a potential author is sharing their story, I can usually pretty quickly sense something that's new and engaging and exciting, and reflect that back to them, and just tell them what I'm seeing and what I'm excited about and what kind of gives me an energetic charge. And usually there's no complicated process that reflecting back ignites something in them. Their true self is longing to be seen. And when it is, it kind of galvanizes something within them that gives them the courage to be visible when they have their value reflected back to them. So really just that safe space for people to share their story before it has to be public. They know someone will help sift through it and help them know what to share. But once someone sees that their life experience and their journey has meaning and value to others, it's just one step at a time. They have just a little bit more confidence in being visible in maybe a slightly bigger context, and then a slightly bigger one. And then maybe they're talking on a stage where they're getting a ton of positive feedback and applause. And then they can see that what they're saying has positive value because it's reflected back in what others are saying.
So there's you said earlier, a compassionate witness, and we hear a lot of times that trauma is not necessarily the result of what has been done to us, but not having an empathetic witness.
Yes.
And so what do you think is the true essence? You referenced this true self. What is it in your perspective that makes this connection from this compassionate witness, this empathetic witness, to the true self? Why does that lure us out, do you think?
Well, I think a lot of us do have some shame in our story. And I think having that, being able to come into a place of grace, of unconditional love, of non-judgment, I think it's a necessary environment that just naturally dissolves shame. And that is such a relief. I just think shame is a terrible burden to bear, and it happens usually when we're on our own and by ourselves, and ruminating on our story and telling ourselves the same story over and over again, and the shame grows and the darkness grows. And just being able to, bring yourself as you are into a space of non-judgment, I think it just naturally dissolves that shame. It's like that spiritual alchemy that happens. It's just the way the world works, like grace dissolves shame, non-judgment dissolves shame. And for us to really live into our true selves, it's not about adding practices. It's not about doing more. It's about letting go. And the main thing that we need to let go of are these limiting beliefs or limiting stories that are not telling us the truth about who we are. And shame is one of those.
I really appreciate you bringing in that aspect, because we oftentimes talk about, like, in order to be more productive or in order to be more creative, we want to pull from these different aspects or these different parts of ourselves. And sometimes to just get to the true essence of the impact, it's not necessarily about adding in, it's about letting go of those aspects of, like, really what matters most in this story. So I appreciate you bringing that perspective forward. One of the things that you had shared in this process of coming on to have this conversation is to see, like, the true and empowering version of your life story. It's not necessarily about happy endings, and you've alluded to this a lot through what you've already shared, but you say to look for growth. And so if somebody is kind of like, oh, I need this happy ending to make everybody feel good, or maybe it is that part that just needs the growth, how do people find growth within their story?
Yep. It really depends on where you see your story beginning and where you see it ending. So I would say picking those beginning and ending points, picking the story arc of your story that you want to focus on or work on sharing. If you want to share a public version of your story, that's really important, because, like, if you look at that classic hero's journey, the person begins at the status quo, life as usual, right? And then there's a descent, into the cave, into challenge, into the end of themselves. And if you stop the story there, it's a pretty depressing story. But if you keep going, right, the story continues and they end up on the other side, even higher than where they were before, because they've made it through and have recognized the gifts, the strengths that challenge has revealed in themselves. And they know those, they carry them with them, and they have them to share with others at the end. So that's just one story arc. That's one way you could frame your story. And so where you start and where you end is really important. And so if you're looking for the growth, you want to maybe look at the part of your story where you can see, I can see how that's the end of a chapter in my life. And you can list strengths and gifts that you pulled from a challenge where it might, the story arc goes down and then you see it come up. So, you can take a more objective look at your life story and tell the portion where you have something to share with others, where, I've heard many people say, don't tell your story when you're still bleeding from your story. That's the key, is to, like, when you look back on that part of your story, you feel empowered because you see what you have to offer. Now, all of us are living a much bigger story that is unfolding, right? And so we often don't want to tell a public version of a story we're still in process with. That's a place where, talk to somebody you trust about it, share your story with someone else, acknowledge you're in process. We're all in process. But, when it comes to thinking about what do I have to offer now, look backwards and look for that ending point where you can really clearly identify some strengths and gifts that make you feel empowered to share with others.
Yeah. Yes. And I know that that's one of the things that you helped me a lot with in the process of working with you, is distinguishing which stories of growth I want to share and which stories of growth I don't want to share. And
yes,
what I
don't
appreciated,
have to share everything. That's
yeah,
right.
yeah. And you gave me permission not to share, which was huge, because I pride myself on being an open source, and also it's okay not to share all of it. And so I really appreciated your power and perspective to be able to say, well, maybe not, maybe not. So I like that and I loved it. And it really helped me as an author feel more confident for when this new version of my book is released to still feel confident in telling my story without maybe the impact of other people's opinion. So it's so important to
Yes.
look for the growth, and you're so good at finding the strengths and finding the gifts within it and supporting that process. So thank you for
Well, we
that work.
feel it too, don't we? I mean, like you feel it. Like if you kind of feel like shut down and not good about sharing part of your story, just imagining. I mean, and that's because, especially if you're sharing it in a book like you are, or on stage or, someplace very publicly where maybe you can't control the audience that's going to see your story. It's just good practice to set good boundaries for yourself. If that's going to be a drain or a demand on you where, you don't feel equipped to, receive maybe some pointed criticism, or it feels too vulnerable or tender to receive public criticism from people who don't know you. That's a good sign. It's not time to share that part of your story publicly to a huge public audience, but it very well might be very appropriate to share in the context of a retreat or a smaller group, and still share it if you know that you have value to share too.
Yeah, yeah. So I know that you've been doing this for some time, helping people get their books out and working with them and developing their story. But you also have a new offer coming up of life story coaching. And so I'd love to just give a minute for you to share a little bit more about that in case somebody's listening to this saying, like, I know I have a story and I just don't know how. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah, because we've been helping authors write books for traditional publishers, for hybrid publishers, for self-publishing about 15 years now. So it's been a while. And we have established a whole strategy and process for people to use, no matter what level of support they need with writing their book. And part of that process does include getting clear on their story and feeling good about being a public persona, because once you start writing a book and becoming an author and sharing a message, just making that shift into public life, it's really important that you feel empowered by your story and are inspired by your own story. And we've also seen that people who are not inspired by their story, or they have some pieces that are a drain to them, that ends up being a creative block even for them writing their book. There's part of them that holds themselves back because they're not ready to be a public figure. And so dealing with someone's story and finding the empowering lens and the empowering version of their story at the very beginning is really important. And it keeps those creative blocks from popping in later, and everything just gets done at the right time. And, everyone deserves to be inspired by their life story. And, you don't have to be writing a book. And so what we really want to do is pull that little piece of our process out of the book writing process and just have a door open for people. And, anyone who needs to share a public version of their story and is getting stuck. I mean, whether it's the, about, your LinkedIn profile description, or the about page on your website, or maybe it is part of your personal story, or even, business story that feels vulnerable that you're sharing as part of a TEDx talk, or even, any kind of offering you have. It doesn't have to be a book. It can still hold us back if we can't see that empowering lens. And so we're just offering a mini coaching intensive around helping you find that empowering lens. It's offering, safe and confidential space to share your story without knowing what needs to be public yet. Gives us a chance to reflect back the empowering lens that we see, and then supports you in drafting the version of your story for whatever, however you need to share it, whatever form it needs to take. So you end up with a draft of an empowering version of your story when you're done. And so we're really excited about that, because it's a process we've honed, and now we just want to offer it to more people, to get them out there and empowered by their own story and helping people and doing what they're meant to do.
How might the world change if we all feel empowered by our story rather than hidden
Yeah.
within our story? And just the way you pointed out, like we put our story in so many different places without even really realizing where we put our story.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
quite remarkable as you started to list off LinkedIn or your bio on your website or in all these other places. Like our story is constantly shared. And so whether you are an author or not, you're still talking about yourself. So I will make sure to share links for that offer and in all places where this is published, and then also on the live here as well. So,
Oh, thank you for that.
yeah, of course, of course. And then a famous last question. Is there anything else you would like to share in the course of this microdose conversation?
Mm, 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 mm. I think I just want to repeat what I said earlier, that everyone deserves to be inspired by their life story, even no matter what challenges you've gone through, no matter how you view your story right now. Give yourself the gift of finding a trusted source, a friend, anyone you know is a safe person to share with, and share your story. Don't stay alone in your story. I think when we stay inside of ourselves and alone, we get the very worst version of our story. Very often, if we're telling our own story without reflection from other people, we aren't telling ourselves the truth. So if you feel stuck in your life story, you feel like things aren't going well, I would say find a safe place to share it with someone else who can be that compassionate witness for you, because I guarantee you will see the fuller truth of your story, because that's really what it's about, is seeing a fuller, more empowering, authentic version of our story instead of just the tiny parts of our story that didn't go well.
And I just keep repeating in the mind over and over.
Yeah.
That pesky little mind has a way of just drilling down into the
Yeah.
one thing that doesn't necessarily always bring us so much value. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I can personally say that if you need a compassionate witness, I fully recommend reaching out to Amanda because
Oh,
you are remarkable to work with. Truly, truly a safe space to really open and share all and then reconstruct to what matters most for the intention of sharing the story. You are so skilled and gifted at what you do, and you've truly impacted my life. And so I have to just say thank you to you for the work that you've done. And I hope that whoever's listening to this feels inspired to reach out because we all do have a story, and our stories do matter.
yes. Well,
Whether
you're
it's just for
very
our own
welcome.
personal enjoyment to have a new lens or for if sharing it publicly in any way. So, thank you for
Exactly.
that work.
Oh, well, it has been an honor to work with you because you have an amazing story and you have done the inner work to find that empowering lens to share with others so that it can empower other people. So thank you for your courage and being willing to share your own story too. So, I mean, that's no small feat. So
Yeah.
it's an honor
No
to
small
support that.
feat for those reaching out too. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for those that are joining us on the live, thank you for your time, your energy, and your presence. And for everyone else who's listening, whether it's on Spotify or YouTube or whatever other channel you find us on, thank you for taking the time to be with us. I fully encourage reaching out to Amanda and Split Seed Media in order to be able to just support you in the evolution of celebrating exactly who you are and the empowerment of your story. So thank you, Amanda, for being here
Oh, thank you,
and
Leah. It
sharing your
was so great.
wisdom.
Oh, thank you. You
You're
too.
so welcome. You're so welcome.